Mrs. Purvis is in the middle of a lesson on common rebel archetypes in contemporary literature when the classroom door opens and the principal walks in. A step behind is this girl with wild blonde hair and an even wilder attitude. She's wearing ripped jeans and an ink blue sweater, the slouchy kind that reminds me of pictures of my mom in the 80s. She's wearing a worn-in pair of Blundstones and an expression that says, "I'm so supremely pissed," and "F you," and "just try me," all at the same time. When she turns her head, I can see that although her hair is long, the back of her neck is shaved up to the base of her skull. I mean, who does that? The principal smiles at Mrs. P. "This is Kate Cooper. She just moved here from out west." Mrs. P. smiles back. "Welcome, Kate. Why don't you take the empty seat beside Sydney?" She motions toward the back of the room, and Sydney chews her thumbnail as Kate walks toward her. The principal leaves, and Mrs. P. continues her lesson. "We were discussing the characteristics of rebels, Kate. Perhaps there's a rebellious character in a book or movie that you admire and can tell us why?" Kate slumps into the empty desk without saying a word, and Mrs. P. doesn't miss a beat. "Sydney was telling us that she admires the noble rebel, because this character has a purpose and leads a worthy cause, like Nelson Mandela or Martin Luther King Jr. Kate throws a sideways glance at Sydney, who starts chewing on her other thumbnail in response. Somehow I doubt they're going to strike up an everlasting friendship. Nobody is looking at Mrs. P., and they probably aren't listening either. Instead, everybody is staring at the new girl, me included. Like, nobody is even shy about staring. If we were apes, we'd probably be hooting and jumping around to get her attention. You can tell from a half-second glance that this girl is never going to fit in at our school. I mean, she's so sophisticated, she seems like a whole new species. Like, again, if we're all apes, she's a panther. But Mrs. P. doesn't let our collective inattention put her off her game. She goes on to explain the differences between the anarchist rebel, the social rebel, and the feminist rebel, and notes that the unique challenge facing the rebel archetype is discovering creative, productive ways to utilize their rebellious nature without allowing it to become destructive. "Does this make sense to you, Kate?" Again, Kate doesn't answer, but stares at Mrs. P. with lowered lids, resentment boiling just below the surface. I shift my gaze between Kate and Mrs. P., wondering why Mrs. P. is coming down so hard on her. I mean, Kate hasn't even taken out a notebook or pen. She's barely had a chance to warm her seat. Finally, Kate speaks. "I guess. Whatever."